the measure of another's fear. Dhammapada Verse 129, Peace, Compassion, and Emotional Mastery. Have you ever reacted before you truly understood what was happening inside you? Someone speaks sharply and something immediately tightens. A message feels dismissive and your mind begins preparing its reply. A disagreement becomes personal. Before long, the original moment is no longer the only thing present. There is anger, memory, pride, fear, and the quiet certainty that you must defend yourself. The Buddha understood this movement of the mind deeply. He saw that beneath many acts of harm lies a simple failure of recognition. We become so occupied with our own pain, position, and reaction that we forget the inner life of the person standing before us. Dhammapada Verse 129 begins with a recognition that is almost painfully simple. All fear pain, all fear death. Place yourself in another's position, and you will understand why causing harm cannot lead to peace. The question is not merely whether we know this intellectually. The question is whether, in the moment when the mind contracts, we can remember that the other person is also trying to protect something. A conflict begins. The story behind this verse begins in a monastery with something outwardly ordinary. A group of 17 bhikkhus had been cleaning a building at the Jetavana monastery. They intended to occupy it after preparing the space. Then another group arrived, known as the Chabagya, or the Group of Six Bhikkhus. The six claimed seniority. Because they considered themselves more senior, they demanded that the 17 give up the place. But the others did not agree. What began as a disagreement over space became a conflict over position. And when the first group refused to move, the Group of Six beat them. The others cried out in pain. The Buddha learned what had happened and reprimanded those who had used violence. A small dispute had revealed something much larger. When the mind becomes attached to being above another person's pain can disappear from view. The need to win. It is easy to imagine that such conflicts belong to another time. Yet the same movement appears in ordinary life. A disagreement at work, an argument at home, a conflict online. At first, you may simply want to be understood, but gradually something changes. Understanding is no longer enough. You want to be right. Then being right is no longer enough. The other person must recognize that they are wrong. The mind begins to measure victory, not connection. Perhaps this is why conflicts can become so disproportionate to their original cause. The visible argument may concern a room, a message, a decision, or a few careless words. Beneath it, however, something else may be asking, do I matter? Am I respected? Am I losing my place? The Buddha's story quietly exposes this danger. Seniority became more important than sensitivity. Position became more visible than pain. And once the other person's humanity disappeared from attention, harm became easier. The simple act of comparison. Then the Buddha offered the verse. All are afraid of the stick, all fear death. Putting oneself in another's place, one should not beat or kill others. The teaching begins not with a command, but with recognition. You know what pain feels like. You know the instinct to pull away from what threatens you. You know the unease of being cornered, humiliated, dismissed, or attacked. So the Buddha asks you to use your own experience as a bridge. If pain matters when it happens to you, why would it not matter when it happens to another? If fear rises in you when you are threatened, why imagine that another person is untouched by fear? This is not abstract morality. It is a movement of perception. Before acting, place yourself where the other person stands. The Buddha-inspired reminder is simple, as you wish to be free from harm. So does the one before you. What happens when we forget? Yet this recognition can disappear remarkably quickly. When anger takes hold, the mind narrows. It selects evidence. It remembers old injuries. It predicts future threats. The person before you becomes less a human being and more a symbol of what has frustrated you. You no longer see the whole person. You see the insult. You see the opposition. You see the obstacle. This narrowing is one of the quiet dangers of emotional contraction. The mind believes it is becoming clear when, in fact, it is often becoming selective. Imagine looking through a forest at night with only a narrow beam of light. Whatever falls inside the beam appears important. Everything outside it disappears. Anger can work this way. It illuminates the injury while leaving the other person's fear, confusion, history, and vulnerability in darkness. The Buddha does not ask you to deny what happened. He asks for a wider seeing. Pain does not always announce itself. The person who acts harshly may themselves be afraid. The person who becomes defensive may feel exposed. The person who constantly interrupts may fear being ignored. The person who seems cold may have learned that closeness is dangerous. None of this makes harmful behavior harmless. Understanding is not the same as excusing. You can recognize another person's inner difficulty and still refuse to participate in their harmful behavior. But the Buddha's way of seeing changes the quality of your response. Without understanding, you may simply pass pain forward. With understanding, you may still say no, still create distance. Still protect yourself, but you no longer need hatred to do it. A tree does not become weak because it bends with the wind. It responds to what is present without becoming the wind itself. Perhaps this is the beginning of inner freedom, responding to harm without allowing harm to organize your own mind. The chain of reaction. Hatred does not end through more hatred. Understanding begins where reaction pauses. A painful word reaches you. A feeling arises. The mind interprets it. Then memory joins the moment. You remember other occasions when you felt ignored. Other people who treated you similarly. Other times when you remained silent and later regretted it. Within seconds, the present moment is carrying the weight of the past. This is why our reactions can sometimes surprise us. The event may be small, but the accumulated conditioning behind it is not. The Buddha repeatedly drew attention to this chain of causes and conditions. What appears to be a single reaction is often a meeting point of many earlier habits. When you see this directly, you may begin asking a different question. Not, how do I stop feeling this? But, what is happening here? That question creates space. And in that space, the reaction is no longer the whole of you. Seeing before acting. There is a profound difference between noticing anger and becoming anger. When anger is unnoticed, it speaks through you. It chooses the tone of your voice, the speed of your reply, the words you later wish you had not used. But when anger is recognized, something changes. You may still feel its heat. Your body may still tighten. Your mind may still produce arguments. Yet now you are seeing the movement. The Buddha's teaching is not asking you to become emotionally empty. It points toward awareness before action. You can notice the urge to send the message immediately. You can notice the sentence forming in your mind. You can notice the desire to make the other person feel what you felt. And for one moment, you do not have to obey. That moment may be very small. But a river changes direction gradually, not because every drop is controlled, but because the conditions guiding its movement have changed. Recognition changes conditions. The difficulty of another mind. We often assume we know why another person behaves as they do. He doesn't respect me. She is trying to control me. They don't care. Sometimes these interpretations may contain truth, but often the mind reaches a conclusion before it has seen enough. Another person's mind is partly hidden from you. Your own mind is often partly hidden from you as well. This is why humility becomes important. You can know that something hurt you without pretending to know every cause behind another person's behavior. The Buddha's invitation to place yourself in another's position is not an instruction to imagine perfectly. You cannot become another person. It is an invitation to remember that there is an inner world there. Just as your visible actions conceal thoughts, fears, memories, and private struggles, so do theirs. That recognition softens certainty. And when certainty softens, curiosity becomes possible. The digital stick. Today, the stick described in the verse may not always be physical. Words can strike. Public humiliation can strike. A cruel comment can remain in someone's mind long after the screen has gone dark. Digital life makes this especially easy because distance can reduce recognition. You see a profile, a comment, an opinion. You do not see the face after reading your words. You do not see the silence in the room. You do not know what else that person may already be carrying. The mind can become more careless when consequences remain invisible. And distraction adds another difficulty. We react quickly because everything invites quick reaction. Scroll. Judge. Reply. Move on. But the Buddha's observation interrupts speed. Before causing harm, remember your own fear of harm. Before using words as weapons, remember how deeply words can enter your own mind. The pause becomes an act of seeing. Comparison and the invisible wound. Much modern restlessness grows through comparison. Someone else appears more successful, admired, attractive, secure, or certain. You see a small window into their life and compare it with your entire private existence. Then dissatisfaction begins. Sometimes comparison does not make us attack another person directly. Instead, we turn the violence inward. We speak to ourselves with a cruelty we would never use toward a friend. We call ourselves failures. We demand constant improvement. We treat every pause as evidence that we are falling behind. But if the Buddha asks you to recognize another person's fear of pain, perhaps the same recognition must eventually include you. You too are a being who wishes to avoid unnecessary pain. Compassion is not indulgence. It does not mean pretending every choice is wise. It means refusing to add hatred where understanding is possible. When defensiveness takes over, the mind that must always defend itself cannot easily see what is actually here. Defensiveness often feels like strength, yet much of it comes from fear. You may defend an opinion because changing it feels like losing identity. You may defend an image because being seen differently feels unbearable. You may defend yourself before anyone has truly attacked you. Then conversation becomes impossible because every new fact appears as a threat. The Buddha's way invites another possibility. Can you let an idea be questioned without experiencing yourself as destroyed? Can you hear criticism and examine it before either accepting or rejecting it? A mountain does not need to argue with every passing cloud. The cloud changes shape, gathers, disperses, and moves on. Not every thought about you requires obedience. Not every opinion requires a counterattack. Sometimes freedom begins when you discover that the self you are defending is more fluid than you imagined. The habit beneath the moment. Many reactions are old habits arriving in new situations. Perhaps you learned early that you had to speak loudly to be heard. Perhaps you learned to withdraw before others could reject you. Perhaps you learned that control feels safer than uncertainty. Years later, the original situation may be gone, but the pattern continues. This is subconscious conditioning in ordinary human terms. The mind learns a path, walks it repeatedly, and eventually mistakes familiarity for necessity. The Buddha paid close attention to habit because what is repeated becomes easier to repeat. But seeing the pattern is already different from being trapped inside it. You notice, this is what I do when I feel threatened. Not with shame. Not with pride. Simply with honesty. And a seed cannot grow in exactly the same way once the ground around it has changed. Awareness changes the ground. The courage to feel without passing it on. There are moments when the most difficult thing is simply to remain with what you feel. You are hurt, but you do not immediately hurt back. You are lonely, but you do not grasp at the first distraction. You are anxious, but you do not force life to give you certainty it cannot provide. This is not passive resignation. It is the courage to meet an experience before turning it into another action. Often we seek immediate relief because feeling itself seems like a problem. But feelings also change when they are allowed to be known clearly. A wave rises. You see it. You do not need to command the ocean to stop existing. The wave reaches its height and changes. In the same way, awareness does not guarantee that every emotion vanishes quickly. It gives you the possibility of remaining present without making every passing state your identity. Understanding is not agreement. To put yourself in another person's place does not mean abandoning your own place. You may understand why someone is angry and still refuse their violence. You may recognize another person's fear and still set a boundary. You may see their conditioning and still decide that you cannot remain close to them. The Buddha's teaching is not asking you to become defenseless. It is asking you to examine the mind that acts. Can you protect yourself without needing revenge? Can you disagree without making another person an enemy? Can you leave without carrying the conflict as a permanent identity? This is subtler than simple forgiveness. Sometimes nothing needs to be declared. You simply stop carrying the argument after it has ended. The hand opens. What it was gripping may still exist, but it no longer has to be held. The other person is also you. Look deeply enough, and the boundary between my fear and your fear becomes less absolute. The verse returns us to its beginning. All are afraid of the stick. All fear death. Beneath our different histories, identities, ambitions, and opinions, there is a shared vulnerability. You wish not to be harmed. So does the person beside you. You wish to be understood when you are confused. So do they. You know that your worst moment does not contain your whole life. The same may be true of another. This does not erase difference. It makes difference easier to hold. The Buddha's insight is not that everyone behaves well. Clearly, they do not. The insight is that clear seeing must include the reality of another person's inner life. When that recognition is present, your response may become firmer or gentler according to what the moment requires. But it is less likely to be blind. And perhaps that is the quiet release hidden in this ancient verse. Nothing outside you may change. The difficult person may remain difficult. The uncertainty may remain uncertain. But you are no longer seeing through the narrowest part of your fear. You see pain without needing to multiply it. You see anger without automatically becoming its messenger. You see another person, and for one clear moment, you remember that they too are trying to move through life without being hurt. Freedom. Freedom does not come from arranging life so that nothing ever disturbs you. Life will continue to bring disagreement, loss, irritation, uncertainty, and moments when the mind wants to protect itself at any cost. The Buddha offers no promise that you can control all of this. Instead, he points towards something quieter. See what is happening before you add yourself to the chain of harm. Remember your own fear when you are tempted to create fear in another. Recognize your own wish for peace when you meet someone whose behavior makes peace difficult. This does not make you weak, it makes you awake. And perhaps awakening begins in moments far smaller than we imagine. A harsh word that is not returned. A reaction that is noticed before it becomes action. A boundary set without hatred. A stranger seen not as an obstacle, but as another vulnerable human being. Then nothing external has necessarily changed. Yet the experience of life has changed because perception has become clearer. And this eased because it was understood, not because it was fixed. This is Buddha Reflections, where philosophy, insight, and lived experience meet to explore mind, impermanence, and release. Thanks for your time, it's been a delight. What should we explore next? Comment, share, and save your insight. Subscribe to Orbital Dharma and keep your thoughts bright.